and welcome to the first episode of Activist Stories. My name's Lance Brown, and today I'm with Stormy May. Stormy calls herself a student of life. I would call her, obviously, an activist and sort of like a peace activist, homelessness activist, and foremost, what I learned about, like when I met her, an animal activist, specifically horses. And so let me talk about when I met Stormy. We'll bring her in a second. I met Stormy just about 5 years ago, which is surprising to me, and how long, like it's been that long. And at the time, I knew her as this person who had been going along, and we'll see if that's even true, had been going along with her normal life, doing her thing, and had recently, I think about a year before I met her, sort of a revelation, a change in perspective about everything she was doing. And this, to me, is one of the most fascinating kinds of activist stories. This is the kind of story that makes me want to do this show, is the kind of person who is going along and has a thing that they're really into in their life, and then they shift, and that same thing that they're really into takes a whole new direction and becomes a purpose in their life, and becomes something that it wasn't before, that through thoughtfulness and like I said, a change in perspective. And the topic, the center of that, is a documentary called Path of the Horse, which we'll definitely talk about in a few minutes, where Stormy lays out that change in her perspective as a horse person her entire life, who took a major turn kind of in the middle of her life somewhere, to take a new course. I'll just bring Stormy in. Welcome to the podcast, Stormy.
Hi, Lance. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. And I'm winging it. I'm still learning how these interviews are going to go. So thanks to the listeners for the patience with my stammering and so on. And let me apologize in advance. Part of my activist story, my personal activist story, involves animals, cats and dogs. So anticipate interruptions and sounds from cats and dogs throughout the life of this podcast, most likely, because, like I said, that's part of my activist story. They're looming behind me right now, waiting to make trouble. And animals actually was one of the things that Stormy and I should say you and I'll start talking to you now, connected on at first, because I'm a sucker for an animal person, and I think she's probably the same. You're the same way, right, Stormy?
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's one thing that we, when someone who has, and that's another change in perspective thing, someone who comes to see animals in a certain way that's hard to explain to people who haven't seen them that way, and you don't have to explain it to people who have seen it. They understand what I'm saying right now. But when you meet someone who has taken that perspective on animals, I guess you could call it a more evolved perspective or enlightened perspective on animals, it's an immediate kinship, because it's, for obvious reasons. So yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, Stormy. Right around, I was trying to remember, your mid-30s or so, you had been animal trainer, a horse trainer, training people for horse competitions, right, and equestrian stuff. Am I correct?
Right. I trained horses and people of all ages. I was really involved with the United States Pony Club, and I went all over the country teaching and judging, and I started a lot of young horses. I really did. For a while, I was conditioning polo ponies. I was competing in dressage and eventing through the 80s and 90s. Did it all really for over 20 years. And
From when you were a little kid, right?
Yeah.
And grew up as a toddler, basically, even.
Yeah,
right?
I just came out that way. As soon as I knew what a horse was, that's what I wanted to be with. And I got my first horse at 10, and then I've had horses continuously since then.
Your name, even, actually, we should get that out of the way. Your actual name is Marina May, and you have basically a pen name, a nom de art or whatever, which is Stormy. You use it pretty much all the time, right? I mean,
no, not these days, really. The people I meet in real life know me as Marina, so it really has become more of a pen name. And it doesn't matter to me. Call me what you want, but generally, I'll introduce myself as Marina these days.
But for a while it was sort of your if I can say it, like sort of like your superhero cape.
Yeah,
is that
I think
right?
It still is.
From when you were a kid, right? Because it evolved out of a series of books that you read as a kid. It was like one of the horses in that book, right? And Stormy Misty's Foal. You told me the name of the book was.
Yeah, the original book was Misty of Chincoteague, and then the next one was Stormy Misty's Foal. So my best friend was Misty, and I became Stormy, and we did the whole horse girl thing. I mean, and then I got the real horse at 10, and for me it was always, I wasn't really into cartoon horses. I wanted the real thing. I wanted to be with horses.
Right, and you were, for the most part, I don't know what the term is, kind of on the mainstream path, right, with horse. Again, like you said, like horse shows, official organizations. You were obviously using saddles and all the conventional, just standard ways of handling horses and being with horses and all that stuff, right?
Yeah, and actually I was always fascinated by bits, the bit that you put in a horse's mouth to control it. And in 2003, I had been teaching about bits so much that I thought I'll make a video about it. So I did. I made a video called Understanding Bits, and that sold for many years. But it was ironic that as soon as I made that video, I stopped using bits altogether and used bitless alternatives because I saw the damage that bits cause. And, however you sugarcoat it, you're still hurting the horse when you pull on the reins.
Right. So now we're getting to the heart of your transformation. So this is, like you said, 20 years in or so into your involvement with horses. And, would it be fair to say that you just kind of, accepted what you were kind of told and trained and taught and were just doing it like you were supposed to do it?
Yeah.
And then eventually, like you said, but I guess for professional reasons, started digging a little more into the nitty-gritty of what is actually happening here, how does it work, how can it be done better, and so on.
Right.
And through that...
Well, it really was out of love for certain horses in my life that were telling me... the love that I have for horses, I've found, is just the love of being together as, fellow beings. So...
Right.
So in training them, that's just what people did. So I followed along, and that's what I did. But then there were these certain horses that came into my life that had other things to say, and they said they didn't like me riding them, and they didn't like the bit, and they didn't like these things. And I'm holding my hands up and saying, well, it's not a matter of you liking it or not. You're a riding horse, and
this is how it works.
Your life. And
I have that discussion with my dogs about leashes every single day.
Right. Yeah. So
it's just like this is how we do it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I don't like it any more than you, but this is what has to be done, kind of.
Right. And what else could we do? So I looked, and there were other people doing slightly different things in like riding with no bridles on, and working, out in the open at liberty. And so I thought, well, that looks more real. That looks more like the horse has to agree because there's nothing on their heads. So I went and that was kind of the path of the horse search, was what's going on here, and can I make that work with these horses who don't seem to want to do what I want them to do?
Right. Now, hey, you said something interesting a minute ago. You said that you basically were working with some horses, or probably living with them, in part of your life, and they started telling you, I don't like that, I don't want to do it that way. Isn't it probably true to say that what really happened is you started hearing that? Because, I'm sure those horses 10 or 20 years earlier probably weren't digging bits a whole lot either. But part of it is that you opened up, you started listening and connecting in a more advanced way than you had been, and developed more empathy. Is that Am I?
Yeah, that's probably a much better description of it. Really, is that I, I had been there and done that so much, and I looked ahead and saw the people that were the top in my field, and they just didn't look like people I wanted to be like. So I went searching for myself. Who do I want to be? And in that, I gained more sensitivity to the horses and saw that yeah, I mean, obviously if they wanted to do what we're asking them to do, they would do it without any rope line,
without any force being applied
to them.
Right.
And this is not the third world. This is a very affluent world that I live in, and there's pastures and run-in sheds and places that horses can live a beautiful life without having to work. So it was like that level of lie kind of exposed itself to me in my search to truly love these animals, like love them so much that they don't need to work for me.
Right, love them just for the sake of for existing, rather than for them serving a purpose for you, or being a means to an end, or a show, a trophy, or whatever.
Right, as if you have your pets there. These are my animals that I want the best for them. And when I realized that, riding actually damages their back, and bits and halters actually damage their head, and shoes actually damage their feet, that it's, how can I keep doing it and still say that I love and truly have these animals' best interests in mind?
Right. And so I got to say, one thing that I love about you as an activist and as an example of an activist is that one thing you've done, and I'm sure you're aware of this, people write you letters, your movie, Path of the Horse, which is at pathofthehorse.com, right?
Yeah,
and also
ourhorses.org is really where I'm focusing mostly right now. Right.
So ourhorses.org, it's playing there, streaming for free. And I watched it. I got it as soon as I met Stormy. She gave me a copy of it on DVD. This is 5 years ago, and I consider myself a pretty well-evolved person as far as animals go. And I now looking back and what I am now compared to what I was 5 years ago, I feel like I was a big doofus back then, and I still have now I recognize how much farther I still have to go, but. As I was saying, the thing that I really love about your activism is you manage to create something that for a lot of people is instant transformation. It's just that they watch that movie and they are changed. And to me, that is that's as good as it gets as far as activism goes. And I don't even know that you thought of that as activism at the time. It seemed more of like art and expression, a communication from yourself, but to me, by my sort of working definition of activism, which is like to create positive change, do stuff to create positive change for others. The fact that your movie, I don't know that everybody has an amazing instant transformation, but I do know that some people do, and I personally did myself. Like I have since then just don't look at horses the same. People riding horses, and I feel it's like one of those things when you become a vegetarian or whatever, and or a non-smoker or whatever, and you just look back and you judge so hard at the people who who are still unevolved or whatever. And I'm out in a town now where there's a lot of people sort of doing the old ways with horses, and it's hard for me to not just look and be like, you ignorant people, look at where and I try and be sympathetic and understanding that they, that it's hard to see that. Like, I mean, even you went so long without really seeing it, even fully loving horses and stuff. It can be easy to be desensitized, I guess, when it's to serve a purpose. Like it's when you're using these things to achieve an end or whatever, using these animals to achieve an end. I don't know if that's not really a question, but I just wanted to let you know, how impressive that was for me, that you, and really great in that you took just you just walk through in the movie, spoiler alert, how the transformation, the things that you saw, that you have the segment about bits, basically, that just, and it's this moment in the movie that is undeniable, where you show all these, still frames, basically, I think it was, of horses with bits, and they are hating it. Like, it's just one after another after another. Hating it is the softest way to put it. Their expressions are like agonized and tortured and stuff, and it just causes you to pause. It's not a moment you ever see, with horses in real life, because it's going by in an instant, like you don't freeze on that moment in real life for most people, and you force people to freeze on that moment and be like, this is a moment that those individuals, those horses, are experiencing. And it changed the way I saw the world. And I know it's done so for thousands of other people. And I think that's just, fantastic. Like, you can pack it up, retire, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, it has been amazing to me, too, the way people receive it. And, what a blessing that's available, something that takes an hour and can change your whole perspective. And I have had people write me that say they immediately stopped writing, they immediately stopped using bits, or they immediately changed their career plans or put their horses in sanctuary. And, what an amazing thing to be part of.
Yeah, honestly, I got to tell the listeners, I have chills right now. I'm not kidding. Just from thinking about sort of, it's a combination of the actual film, and I'm just like, I'm an activist junkie. So to me, that just, it's like a master, moment of activism that just makes me really excited, because it, it's like this, it's like discovering a little gem that when you look at it, it shows you things you didn't see before. And, it's really great. So let's scroll way back to very young Marina, maybe even, well, probably not before the name Stormy came into play, but way back in the day, I would call you pretty much a full-fledged, full-time activist at this point. It's what your whole life is pretty much about. We'll talk about that, more current stuff in a few minutes. But what about, like, way back when? Do you think, has there been seeds of this? Have there been instances or episodes back in the past? I mean, what would you consider, like, your first act of something resembling activism from, whenever that might have been? Was this the first time that you, in the mid-2000s, kind of turned to make change in the world and take action like that? Or had it been something that, you've done in the past and were growing into?
Yeah, I think there's always been a thread of, I want to find out how to make this place kinder and gentler for everybody. And
when's the first time you remember thinking that?
I remember being very little and my mom watching, this was back in the 70s, she was watching on TV, there was a fundraiser to feed starving children in Ethiopia, and they showed the starving children with the distended bellies, and my mom was crying. And
classic 80s moment.
Yeah, my mom was just crying and calling my grandmother to send them money to feed these children. And so as I grew up, I saw that the world is a pretty harsh place. I did my own traveling and checking out what's true and what's distortion. And so, I was lucky to have horses in my life, but through that, whether it's be kinder to horses or be kinder to humans, that really seems like the thread of what I've been trying to find out here in this lifetime.
And so what about actions? Did you ever do anything, when you were younger or high school age or any of that along that path? Like, have you been doing things for horses in the past beyond just kind of befriending them and having them be part of your life or so on?
Yeah, mostly that. Mostly trying to fit in, trying to be the best at whatever I could be. Like, I also love to paint and to take photographs, and so I've gone do graphic arts. I've gone kind of into each of those fields to find love, to find understanding, to find how even the unlovable can be loved.
Right. And so that all basically kind of built and accumulated the learning and the different skills, because you actually use art, you continue to use art in your activism and in your work up until, these days, like today, or I don't know about today, but you share on Facebook artistic renderings of horses, and you're trying to move people through art for sure. And which actually brings us to the movie, because I haven't told listeners the most interesting part. One of the most interesting parts about the whole path of the horse thing, which is, and correct me again if I'm wrong, you sold your house. You quit all your doings with conventional horse training, judging, the whole circuit, stepped out of basically all the things that you were doing on those fronts, shut it all down, and turned your purpose towards what it has now become, and again, sold your house to fund the traveling and the research and the camera work and so on that it would take to make that movie. Is that all pretty accurate?
Yep, that's what I did. Yeah.
And in your mid-30s or so, right? And so, again, you got I've got these different things that I love about like an activist can make me excited because they're super bold, like Femin, like those people I was just seeing them, they're the women in like Russia and stuff who go naked for causes, and they're burning ISIS flags topless and stuff just to raise attention. And I love people who do crazy creative things like that. I love people who plug away at stuff for decades with no real necessarily tangible results until they finally get that. There's all these different kinds of characteristics of activists that I really love. And the activist who basically dumps everything that they knew because they've come to a decision, they've come to a conclusion that they've got to serve a different purpose, and that this is a calling basically to them, and in the literal sense of a calling, basically it calls them away from everything that they've been doing and everything that they know, and they step into this whole new path. And create it, usually in that case, create a whole new path. I mean, people who have that kind of transformation, they tend to be starting something new, all new to humanity, kind of, because it's this personal, accumulation that has finally built up. And so, yeah, kudos again on that. Obviously, I mean, kind of an insane choice to make by many measures, Did you feel that at the time? I mean, what?
Yeah, I mean, it really is not a smart thing to try and build your own career that involves teaching people to not ride horses. So
yeah, and shed almost everything that you've learned to start just from scratch again,
right?
And it's like learning a whole. You mastered the English language, and you're like, I'm not going to speak in English anymore. I'm going to speak in Arabic, and I don't know Arabic yet, but I can start watching videos and talking to people about it, and I'll start from there. And
right, except with speaking Arabic, there's a group of people that speak Arabic.
Yeah, that's
where I was
point.
going. It's like, you know what? This is really not going to be popular for a really long time. But there,
although
there are people that
that's what I was
got
say.
it right away and got it sooner than I did.
And yeah, that's you sort of adventured around the globe a bit in the research for the movie. Am I right?
Yeah.
And met people like in Russia and all these different people who who's the guy in Russia who basically he sort of like dances with them, right? And he has them counting. He has horses.
Well, yeah, I think you're talking about Alexander Nevzorov.
I am. Yep.
And he's really the one that I've followed because he is the one that was really exploring the inner path of who am I in relation to this animal. And he's not selling things. He's not promoting his horsemanship method. He's exploring with horses. So he taught horses Latin, and many of his students still do. But in that, he stopped riding, obviously, and this is the best I can do at translating his transformation, is he saw that the horses were asking to just be horses. So that's what he and his wife Lydia feel is the best now, is let horses be horses. And I couldn't agree more. Like, the more I know horses as their own beings, the more I want to help them do that more and more. I mean, they're kind of like the natives that we took their land from. And now what can I do? Well, I can be the best steward or guardian I can in helping them live the rest of their years in peace and harmony and stable herd structure, and still taken care of, because most of them, they all were born in captivity, and they're very bonded with humans, especially mine, because I only have 3 here, so they each get a lot of individual attention. So, I mean, I'm kind of going off into the next question that I usually get, which is, well, so you're saying we should turn them all out in the wild? And so I'm answering that right now.
So actually, you touch upon something, and this is a huge tangent off of the sort of activist insider story thing, but listeners are going to have to get used to that when there's a guest relating to animals, because this is, to me, one of the most fascinating areas of for myself, and I think for humans going forward. So I've been watching, I keep seeing all these videos on YouTube of different kinds of animal interactions and human-animal interactions that, I mean, like a lot of things on YouTube, we never used to see these, like before, in the 80s and the 90s, when there wasn't video sharing happening every day. You wouldn't see, like, the guy who hangs out with lions and, like, has the big lion that jumps up and hugs him and rides around on his back and stuff like that. Or you wouldn't see the duck feeding the fish, which I've seen a couple of videos of that recently. Or there's one with a guy, maybe a woman, doing this sort of laying ballet type of thing with a horse. It's been a couple of years since I saw that one, but just this wild sort of slow laying on the ground kind of dance thing that I can, interpretive dance almost, with a horse. And so do you have any thoughts on, how, like, that seems to me, especially because of the videos, then you get acceptance of that sort of thing. People are like, oh, people can dance with a horse, or a guy can hang out with lions, or, ducks feed fish. And it's something now you're like, oh, that's part of how the world works. I didn't really think ducks were hanging out feeding fish, but apparently that happens. And same thing, horses learning Latin or whatever, dogs and cats doing amazing fun things and all this stuff. So do you have any thoughts on that, on sort of it's almost like breaking down the barriers of discrimination or whatever that, we've all just taken for granted, living in like a human-centric world. We don't really think about animals just hanging out with each other. We don't really think about animals as our peers that we would, like, necessarily give piggyback rides to or dance with or so on. But now we're seeing on the web that, like, that is a thing. That people do that sort of stuff. That is part of the world, is that animals aren't just a given animal. It isn't necessarily just that wild animal you used to see on National Geographic or what's its name, Mutual of Omaha's show there. Wild Kingdom, 80s reference. That it's not just that a monkey can become best friends with a duck or whatever. Any thoughts on all that? Because you spend a lot of time hanging out with horses, not riding them, not doing any of the stuff that humanity has mostly done with horses, that, 99.9% of people think this is what you do with horses. This is how horses are. This is how it works. They're either being ridden, or they're being worked, or they are in herds, running around on the wild plains or whatever. But you are trying to live in concert with them and live as peers with them at a certain level, and give them, autonomy, while also being like the guardian, like you're still caring for them and so on. They don't have 100%. You're not just setting them off, like you were saying. You're not just setting them off into the wild. So a lot of ideas there. What are your thoughts on that sort of stuff?
Well,
or do you need a better question?
I do have some thoughts. And okay. There's a beautiful expression of relationship that can happen, as you were saying, between any two beings. And I think, people have evolved enough to see that, and we can see it now because, like you said, of the internet and the ability to stream video, we've all seen the friendships that we thought were unlikely happen. And that is certainly possible with a horse. But for me, that's not nearly the end of the journey. That's like a step along the journey. And now, it depends on what the person needs. Like if it's a kid or if it's somebody that needs healing who can't get along with humans, then beautiful. I'm so happy that animals are here to give us something to love if you can't love another human. But then that's the thing for me is I realize I'm healed enough. I gotta be with people because I can't help anybody see how to be more gentle if they're hurting inside. So how can I help a hurting person? I know how to help a hurting horse, but now how can I help a hurting person? So if, it's tempting for me to stay out in the pasture and, develop all these new beautiful dances with these horses but it doesn't really feel good anymore because there's something else that I'm called to be doing that is more directly in the world of humans. And so I guess in summary, I'd say beautiful. The dances are beautiful and how cool to see it. But let's keep going. Let's keep seeing ourselves and seeing what is really needed in this world today.
Well, yeah, that's a good segue into bringing up the point that you're not just, an animal person, not just an animal activist, that you have woven that together basically with a broader purpose of, broadly speaking, kind of, saving the world, peace, and just sort of increasing overall wellness, is how I would describe what I kind of get from you. You have it more specifically. You're working on helping homeless people, helping feed people in your local community. That's a big part of it. How do you, but you connect it all too. So is there a way, can you somehow elaborate a little more on how you see it all as sort of the same thing, the same purpose, this all part of a big mission?
Yeah, I would say...
is that an accurate way to...
Okay, so say the mission is to uplift humanity. And, I've been working on this enough to know that the answer is to uplift myself. So what can I do to uplift myself? There's a lot of things that I already do, but there's more. Like growing up, I didn't learn the value of service to any great extent. It was all, do your best yourself so you can get the best job, so you can get enough money, so you can have your own family. Instead of actually you're going to feel happier if you place more importance on helping others, once you yourself are healed enough to be in that space.
Right. Yeah. And finding that, the healing and the finding your own art, finding your own sense of creation, the things that finding what you believe, and your purpose. And
right.
stuff.
Like seeing what's needed in this moment. Like if I'm awake and present and standing in my town, and I look around, there's some people that look like they could use somebody to walk up to them and say, hey, how are you doing? Are you okay? Do you need anything? Are you hungry? Do you have a safe place to stay tonight? Like that to me
Right.
is a superhero, is somebody who would walk up and do that and take care of those of us that don't have family to take care of them for whatever reason.
So I would call you a kind of super empathetic and caring person. Like you said, you see people who are hurting, and your instinct is now, like you were saying, not necessarily always was, but is now, what can I do to help? How can I help alleviate? How can I help that particular person? And it is to you a person by person thing. It's you don't think necessarily. Well, you do think in the big broad abstracts, but you definitely bring it to like, that guy right there is hungry. Let's help him get food, or that guy right there needs uplift, or whatever, or woman. I'm sorry, I was being sexist. It's two guys, they're bumming. Actually, that was opposite of sexist. I guess it was reverse sexist, because the women are fine in that scenario, and the two guys are blowing it. Sorry, just being silly. I guess it's the path of the horse is how you got to that, right? I mean, that's sort of how it connects, is that you were just doing your thing for your stuff. You were working and following the track and getting your house and having your job and doing, help, training people who were coming to you to kind of get their stuff. And everybody was about kind of achieving these goals and stuff, and very directed. And you had the circuit and the schedule, of different things. And you're just kind of following all that. And then you realized, fill in the blank there.
Happiness wasn't there, joy wasn't there, fulfillment wasn't there. It was, it was hurting my body to be riding those horses, riding young horses, riding bucking horses, riding, a spooking horse. It was hurting the horses. It was not, and it
was like traumatic.
It was
right?
traumatic. And again, looking ahead to the top people in the field, it's like that didn't look like any less trauma. I mean, they were out with broken collarbones and broken legs, and horses, who knows what's happening to the horses. It's rough. It's a rough world in the way I used to do things. And I'm trying to bring compassion to that, but then it's like, it's, so going back a little bit, you were saying, there's this part I want to say about, I'm really seeing, like, if we can start writing new stories where it's not about you have to hurt the villain, it's about how can you help the villain. That villain is the one who's crying out the loudest for help, for a friend, for a mentor, for somebody to say, hey, man, you want to go get some coffee instead of doing that bomb? I mean,
right.
Really, it comes down to that. And if you look at all the Disney movies and kids movies and movies in general.
I was just gonna mention Despicable Me. That's pretty much the premise of that movie, which is, this ultimate bad guy, but he really just wants friends and, needs to find, like, his heart.
Yeah, and that is what heals.
Yeah, The Grinch, actually, same thing. The Grinch Who Stole Christmas, exact same thing.
But we forget, and we watch these other movies where Tinkerbell punches Hook in the nose. I mean, that's kind of a violent thing to do. Rather than, hey, Hook, how can we help you? Because it looks like you're pretty miserable.
Yeah, he doesn't get a lot of empathy, that guy,
right.
Captain Hook. I'd never really thought
Right.
about that, but yeah, everybody's pretty much like, throw him to
Right.
the alligator.
Right. And who knows what happened to him as
Screw
a kid
him.
and the garbage that he's seen, because no doubt he's copying it. That's what people do. They copy each other. So,
I wonder.
yeah, so
go
how
ahead.
can we say you're bad, you're wrong? I can't say a horse is bad or wrong. They're just doing what a horse does. A bad person is just doing what they're doing because that's how they learn to do it. And, there is a lot of mental illness, and that looks ugly. But, I mean, I could see the extent would be restrain somebody who's really freaking out. But otherwise, I mean, I would take all the violent people and all the people that believe violence is the solution and send them to Club Med, send them to somewhere where they're taken care of and taught other ways of resolving conflicts than hurting each other.
Yeah, that's tough to accomplish that in today's political environment, I would say, that kind of is, leads me to another point I wanted to mention about you, which is that you're not much of a political type activist. You don't really just seem to kind of go down that road very much. I maybe have seen one or two little political posts about, something really bad's going on with horses or something. You might pass it on with people. But for the most part, you're not, which feeds into the sort of not focusing on the negative or attacking the villain. You're about let's figure out some positive stuff and we'll do that. And, rise the tide or, lift all boats kind of with the rising tide. Does that sound like
absolutely.
accurate?
Yeah.
And that's a conscious choice, right? Absolutely. I mean, that's a tactical Is it also personal? Because, there's a lot of the political side. It's such a combative, atmosphere and a never-ending, war type of environment. Consciously avoiding that for personal reasons as well as sort of strategic reasons.
It's distracting. If I spent my day working on political campaigns, I wouldn't be working on inner peace. And in inner peace, it comes from focusing on peace and being around peaceful people and co-creating peaceful situations. So, it's really like building the next cool thing, like the MP3 players taking over the CD, which took over the record. And if you're fighting the record, you're never going to get the MP3 player. So, politics are what they are, and, the economic system is what it is, and it functions as it functions. But what I'm exploring is something different than that, so it can do what it wants. And I'm working on creating almost different set of beliefs, you don't have to, money and time aren't necessarily tied together.
Well, part of it is kind of that you're not, well, and this is what you're saying, I guess I'm just restating it, is that you're not modeling off of the past.
Right, or I'm not trying to work
it?
within the current system much, other than, I do live in a house and I do pay PG&E and, I do...
Yeah, you're not looking to work outside of it either, necessarily. You're just not looking to work, with the system, per se. Within it, but not necessarily, engage with it and follow its rules and play by its sort of playbook.
Right, it's more like build the new reality, build the new sanctuaries, which is happening. And then as I meet people, we can understand together what's important in this moment. And it's probably not having to do with working harder at a traditional job so that I can buy the next thing.
Right, or electing Democrats and Republicans so that they can have another Congress of conflict or whatever.
Yeah.
Talk to me for a minute about sacrifice, I guess. as I mentioned before, I mean, you have like a family situation. You probably occasionally do recreational things, and you do some stuff here and there to make a living. But for the most part, as far as I know, your whole life kind of is about these things. It's about, again, I define it broadly, but activism and changing the world for the better, and trying to help people. It's pretty much what you wake up every day to do. Does that sound right?
Yeah, but it's more like it gets me. Like my job is just get present, get quiet, and then that's what I feel inspired to do.
But a lot of people, they get quiet for a second and they get inspired to go jet skiing or, watch a football game or even just, read a book or whatever. And you get inspired to do kind of selfless work that might not even, that might be frustrating. It might be... It could be of questionable reward because you're forging into new and challenging territories and stuff. It's going to maybe take a long time before you see fruits from it. So, I mean, you choose what speaks to you is to say, and I'm not, I mean, it's the same with me, which is why I'm asking the question kind of. What speaks to you is go take on this really challenging task and try and change people, rather than jet skiing.
Right. I think that's my art these days. Like in art, with me, even back in painting, I wanted to create something beautiful. So now I realize I can create art on a global scale, like make a movie or come up with a picture and words that can go around the world and be seen and thought
right.
of. So it's, it's a tricky position because it's kind of powerful, but the more smaller and humble I can feel in my real daily life, the more the beauty that comes through is beautiful. I don't know how to finish that sentence. The more beauty comes through.
Right. How do you feel about, like, people see you as a leader? They see you as like a thought leader, but you're also a leader. I mean, you have the Our Horses organization. You have a project we haven't even gotten to and may not get to talking about called Gratitude Bowls, which people can check out at gratitudebowls.org, which is a effort to feed the homeless up in your local area, the Sierra Nevadas, by using basically extra food from restaurants that homeless people can just come and get if they're available. So how do you feel about the sort of the weight or the burden or the responsibility of being a leader? You've also got all these people, and you've probably already kind of passed it, but for you had a lot of pressure probably in those first few years of sort of casting off the old ways with the horses and all that, and all your associates, basically everybody that you knew and worked with all the time, having to you actually don't seem like you tried to lead them all to a new way, right off the bat, but you still had that sort of all eyes on you because you are doing this and the pressures of that. So how do you handle, or how do you feel about that pressure of there's these people who are counting on you? There's people who are always looking to you for advice. You've got people writing in because you're now considered an expert in this, burgeoning field of dealing with horses in a different way and seeing horses in a different way. How do you feel about that?
Yeah,
being a leader?
It's interesting you phrase it like that because I really don't see it like that.
I feel like you kind of don't.
My job is to merge. I mean, like the less separation, the better. So I'm not.
Wait, Claire, you mean merge yourself or between you and others?
Yeah, to feel less separation between me and others. So like
okay.
if I am others, how can you even have a leader? I mean, you're all together and sometimes one person's going to lead one way for a step, and then another person's going to lead another way for a step, and then another person's going to lead another way for a step. And it's really about dancing with humans and getting myself in the company of humans that are further along that path to peace than I am. So I really don't spend time leading. I mean, and I that's kind of something I fight against now, is me trying to take people my own way. I mean, really, I'm trying to serve and blend in, and but serve something higher. Serve these other people that are creating beautiful things in the world, like my friends up in Ashland at Sanctuary 13. Ren and others up there are creating this beautiful program to bring horses and humans together. Really, I mean, I just sit back and marvel at the way she does the work, because it's so authentic and real, and I feel just blessed that I can relax and see how she's creating this vision of sanctuary and helping humans and helping animals. So yeah, I think that's kind of the way of the future, is any leader that I'm going to be following is going to be one that helps us all come together, less separation.
So you see yourself, I guess, you say you don't think of yourself as a leader, but you are effectively kind of in real life doing some leading, but I guess you would call it that you're more of like an enabler, a catalyst.
I can point to where I see cool things happening and say, wow, look at this, and I think that's the next movie I'm working on, The Path of the Human. That's kind of what it's about, is looking at the ways that we're already well on our way towards a peaceful world. And, if I can add some fuel to that fire, great. But it's not me leading. It's me looking around and seeing who's already doing it.
Right. Yeah, I'm just listening and thinking. I'm sorry, I'm supposed to be interviewing, and I'm just kind of soaking that in. So what advice would you give to new activists? Let's say, well, I guess either way. You got your 15-year-old, your 17-year-old or whatever, your 21-year-old who's in college, who's all fired up, who's like ready to rock the world. Or you've got your sort of regular adult who was just kind of going on with life, but who is now in their 30s or their 40s or their 50s, and they've reached a boiling point or a moment of transformation where they need to, do the things that they need to work towards what it is that is important to them, and they can't sit idle anymore. You have any advice or thoughts or, from your experiences of doing this, I guess almost around 10 years now, huh? Since you've been sort of had the activist hat on
I guess
at some level?
If that's defined as really gone against popular mainstream culture, it's been about 10 years.
Yeah, well, working to achieve change, that's kind of against, by definition, sort of going against the mainstream, because the mainstream is status quo.
Yeah, so I would say just live your dream. Don't travel and do what you want to do. Don't let people tell you no. Try it, because probably the worst that you think is going to happen is probably not going to happen, and the best certainly can't happen if you don't do something different. So yeah, go for it, keep going for it. And, at some point for me, it led me to, I keep doing the same things over and over again, and this still isn't happy or fun. So what can I do differently? And then try that. And, that walking the path that way led me to find, people who could walk the path in a way that looked really good to me, looked like, wow, these people can really work it out. These people can take care of not only themselves, but others in a real way. Like really be there, really, even if it's, they can really listen to you. This person can really listen to me. This person really doesn't get bothered with whatever I've never seen this person angry. How is that so? So, if somebody is on this path of what's going on in this world, hopefully you'll find that and don't give up till you have, because the people are out there. And some of them are regular spiritual teachers, and some of them are animals. And
I think that the catalyst for awakening, or the whatever it is that's gonna push you to change, or to make a shift, or to choose a new path. I actually think, and I don't know, it's not something I've thought through a lot, but I kind of think it's like, it's always available to people, and it's sort of like something that comes along, and that becomes not like the excuse, but it's like a handy sort, not an excuse, but a validation. This thing happened, so now you can get really involved in such and such. Sometimes it's a personal thing, like like the woman who founded Mothers Against Drunk Drivers or whatever. She certainly could have been against drunk drivers, and probably was, before her son, I forget if it was son or daughter or whatever, before her family member got impacted by it. But then that happened, and, she saw the light and decided, okay, I'm going to start a national organization and try and really, change things on a huge scale. She obviously could have chosen that, at any point, or used just an article about some other kid dying in a drunk driving accident. Could have been the thing that she said, oh, well, that's one too far, or whatever, So I do kind of feel like it's the opportunity, or the excuse, or the trigger event is available to you kind of as soon as you start looking at it. It's like it ties into what you were saying about horses, or what I sort of was analyzing about what you were saying about horses, which is that it's not that they started saying, hey, we don't like bits. It's that you started listening to them saying, we don't like bits. And you're like, hey, wait, what are they saying? Oh, now I hear what they're saying.
Yeah,
or, like
I always knew it, but I believed the story of, well, sorry, but you got to do this. Like you believe the story that sorry, but you got to have a collar and a leash. But,
right.
If you lived on a
and
huge ranch,
though I
you
realized
wouldn't need a collar and a leash, but you don't, so you do.
Yeah, and don't tell the authorities, but my 15-year-old dog Mojo doesn't need a collar and a leash, and doesn't use one. So, but I've got younger dogs with less training, and there's the dangers and the worries and all that stuff, and there's the laws, and I definitely do kind of just accept it, even though I hate it, and I think it doesn't seem right. It doesn't seem like it's the total answer to that issue, to that problem. It doesn't seem like we've kind of gone far enough and truly figured out what the best way to do that is. So it's a very imperfect, solution that puts me in a paradigm that I don't like, where I'm I'm holding basically my friend like on a leash with a collar, which I would obviously never do with an actual human friend. So it's weird. Are there any particular resources or tools or techniques or methods, anything that you've learned or figured out that helps you get things done faster, better, more, on a practical side of things? Anything that you think you have figured out you've kind of figured out hacks for, life hacks for?
A big good one is how to be happy. I found out that you just something you learn, you just practice it and you learn it, and then you don't have to worry about being happy. I think that there's studies that say that 10% of a person's happiness depends on their circumstances, and the other 90% is on how they interpret them.
Well,
So,
go ahead.
recommend that as a life hack. Learn how to be happy. And there's people who teach how to be happy, and it works.
Yeah, you're actually reminding me of something I was going to mention a minute ago, which is that you that your path sort of you said it was, that you weren't happy with the way things were going. You didn't enjoy the sort of day to day of what you were doing with your time and with your life, and even with these animals that you loved and stuff. It wasn't translating into a positive experience for you. And I didn't want to interrupt you at the time, but in my head I was like, so it was selfish, basically. All this sort of selflessness ultimately grew out of this selfish goal to just be happier and enjoy your life. And it's interesting that that I think, not to get too philosophically profound or whatever, but that's like the sort of ideal is you head towards happiness, and on that journey towards happiness you find purpose, and you find what you're meant to do and what you're meant to be and how you fit into the world. And that's the true ideal, is that you're not forcing it. You're not going to do something struggling against the natural current. You're searching around until you find that natural current that is your current. And then once you're in that, it's just basically flow.
I like that.
To use the popular word. Neat. Cool. Well, all right. So, we gotta wrap up pretty much. And so the final part of the interview is generally going to be, and we've covered a lot of it. I mean, if people aren't sold on your cause yet, then, that's a little bit on them, because I think the things that you're pursuing are, kind of arguably or, inarguably, positive goals, but there's Our Horses, which is ourhorses.org, and people can go check that out. And that you're working on kind of just evolving people's understanding of horses, and you've also, in a more practical sense, are working on sanctuaries, transforming the way that horses live.
Yeah, actually, I would say they're more human sanctuaries. There's horses there. There's a lot of animals there living in harmony with the people, but really they're human sanctuaries. For right now, it's more for humans who want to come and want to experience this different way by being in company with these different people, that are really working on themselves and living in harmony with the animals around them as well.
Right on. And then you also have, and then I know you don't like to be oppositional, but if someone forced you to say to someone who rides horses, someone who is in the zone you used to be in, who's just going along, and they love their horse, let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. So I'm not talking about necessarily horse racers and the people who are really just, making a industry out of it, and probably a lot of them maybe are just too desensitized to even want to listen, and they've got the material, motivation to not listen. But let's say someone who is just a horse owner, horse lover, but they follow the conventional road. They use a bit, they use a saddle, they break horses in order to train them, break their will basically, work against the horse until the horse is dominate the horse kind of, and use those sorts of methods. Again, not out of any ill will, but just because that's how it is. That's how they've always learned it. They don't know a lot of other options. And let's say the person wants to hear it. They're not super defensive, which I know is something that must be a huge part of the package. It's working, because you're asking people to sort of tear down their or almost judge their past. Well, you wouldn't ask that, but it comes with the package almost, to have to realize that what you were doing in the past was not good. So all that prelude, what would you say to someone based on what you've learned and what you've understood, if they said, "Well, help me understand it, so that I want those tumblers to tick over in my head as quickly as possible." What would you say to help them reach the insight that you've reached?
Well, good.
Which I know goes against your nature.
No,
in
but
general.
if the person's genuinely asking,
gun to your head, you have to persuade.
If they're genuinely asking, I would definitely send them to Alexander Nevzorov's school online. That's a free school, and there's lots of help there. And but I like the analogy of carrying somebody on your back, or even a backpack on your back. You know, it sometimes it's kind of okay, and sometimes it's kind of a drag. But the horse is very sensitive. You know, there's studies now there's a study that says that horses might even feel more pain than humans. They just express differently. So,
because of the nature of their, like, the way their back tissue is or something, right?
Yeah,
Isn't that kind of how it was?
Their anatomical structure is not designed to bear a vertical load from above. And there's a lot of damage that goes on under the skin that you can't see. But even, I mean, you have to ask the question, why? Why do I really need to get on this horse's back? And if you have a valid reason you really need to do it and you can't think of any other way, then you got to do what you got to do. But I mean, it comes down to who you want to be. Like, do you want to know in your heart that you really don't have to get on this horse's back? And it may mean it. I wanted to find that line. So I thought, well, if I can do it all with no tack, you know, the horse comes up to the fence, lets me get on, lets me ride off, which I did, by the way. And
no tack,
saddle,
meaning,
no bridle,
no saddle,
nothing. The horse
no
walks up to me in a
ropes.
field, stands
Right.
next to a rock, knowing that I'm going to get on, and we go for a ride. I did that. It can be done. It's, you know, part of the dance. But then, like I said, you move on and you realize there's other things to do in life besides test out whether it's okay to be on the back of a horse. But again, do it if you need to do it, but keep going. You know, don't get stuck there.
Don't get stuck there. Because I was going to say, you know, being a little bit of a not even devil's advocate, but, you know, to me, the classic image of a horse lover is, and this is probably a stereotype, but also probably accurate, is a woman who, you know, has a positive and healthy, loving relationship with riding the horse and so on. And just, it's from movies, really. You see the woman riding and they're digging it. You know, the horse is going, they're going, and you just get this idea that, and obviously it's meant to be portrayed that way, that they are, together in this exhilarating moment together, and it's enjoyable, and that it's the horse also, you know, not just the woman, or rider or whatever. When I think of men, I think of their cowboys and stuff. They're using the horses more, but the women, like, more, you know, just traditionally would just ride for riding's sake, for dressage reasons and such. But yeah, that they're into it. That not only the woman is getting a rush and enjoying it, the horse is getting a rush and enjoying it too. And so it sounds like you're saying there's a way that's probably maybe acceptable, or even, you know, like okay for the horse in the middle there without the tack and so on, where it's truly voluntary and truly where the horse just has every opportunity to refuse that option and you know, chooses it, and that so that they could still have that relationship, that thrill, that activity.
But there is a
in
cost.
a way that's
there is a cost to the horse's body. Like, you can't say that the horse's body won't be damaged.
No matter what.
You don't know. Just like you're probably hurting the necks of your dogs by pulling on the collar. You know, and that's just...
Oh, yeah,
and,
for sure.
You know, like some parents willingly, they want to put their kids on their shoulders or carry a backpack, and they're just going to mess it up, and
right.
It's okay with them. But who am I to say? I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Because a parent will give a kid a piggyback ride or whatever, and totally voluntary.
But again, it's like not even an issue anymore for me, because the world is really hurting, and there's other things I can spend my time doing than the time it takes to have that relationship. Just because I've had it, I've already had it, and if somebody hasn't had it, I don't know. I can't say what their path is. But for me, I would just say keep going, you know, and if you want to have that, you know, try your best to love that animal and have them not in any pain at your expense, because they can live a fine life without you on their back. And this, part of that thrill of running with a horse is a lot of times it's because that horse is kept in captivity and doesn't have a place to be out running. And really it mirrors how women have been treated for a long time, which is they're bound too. They're bound to the house, bound to the children, bound to the expectations of the husband. And here's this moment of freedom
right.
on the horse.
I guess that's totally true. In those classic movie moments that I'm talking about, that's exactly what they're doing. Is this? It's the woman. It's the king's daughter or whatever who is like stuck up in the tower all the time, but she gets that moment of release.
And they both get that moment.
They both get to be free
and
briefly.
I'm just saying, keep going.
That's true.
There's something beyond that doesn't involve making the horse do what you want. It involves appreciating the horse as the horse is.
Right on. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. That's our time for now. This has been just everything I had hoped it could be and more. A really awesome talk with a really awesome activist. And anything else you want to say, Stormy?
Thank you, Lance.
Any other thoughts?
I appreciate the depth that you've gone into this on your own path, and it really shows through in a heartfelt interview. So thank you for creating this forum.
Right on. I appreciate it, and thank you for being the debut guest on Activist Stories. It's been a delight.